Hey everybody, it's Mike Jeffers, Chicago Jazz Magazine, and welcome to our feature interview for June 2019, Chicago Jazz Digital Magazine. Jim, I am so glad we finally got to sit down and talk about this. We have Jim Gailloretto, the incredible composer, arranger, saxophonist, and probably many other things that we're going to get into here. It's incredible that we get to sit down because you've been traveling a ton. You're recording an album, which we're going to talk about first. You're playing constantly, so I'm glad we finally pinned you down. Yeah. We had got you in here to Flashpoint Academy, where we're doing all of these great feature interviews.
Glad to be here, my first time. Yeah.
So let's talk about the new recording that you're doing that's coming out on Delmark late summer.
Right.
And it's with the Metropolitan Jazz Octet. It's called Dee Sings Billy.
Yep.
So Dee Alexander's involved
Dee
in it, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But how did this whole thing come about? I mean, it sounds unbelievable, and I can't wait to hear it.
Well, I mean, it really came about from running into Dee at the Green Mill. She was doing something that they have annually called Toys for Tots, which John McLean leads. It's to raise money for kids and to help them, with Christmas and all that that brings. And Dee was sitting in, and I think I was either sitting in or I had just finished, and then she came up on stage. And I had known of her, but never really saw her in person. And she got up there, and I was like, I couldn't believe what I was hearing, just her voice is just amazing. And the ease and comfort and love and compassion and just energy she had. So I had to talk to her. So I went up to her. I said, "Hey, Dee, I'm Jim Gailloretto, and I'm with this band called the Metropolitan Jazz Octet." And she goes, "Oh, Jim, I know who you are."
When was it? Was this recently?
This was like 2 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
You guys never worked together?
We never worked together. Yes,
insane.
It's such a big town and a small town.
Yeah.
But so she goes, "Yeah, I know who you are. I play your music all the time on my radio show." And I was like, first of all, I was charmed right off the bat. I said, "Wow, thank you." And she knew about some projects I did with my string group, Jazz String Quintet, and I was like, "Wow, thanks. I'd love to talk to you more about And so we connected again, and that was the year. That following year, we did a CD release of the Metropolitan Jazz Octet called The Road to Your Place. It was without Dee, but I said, "Listen, we're doing a CD release concert at Studio 5 in Evanston. Steve Rashid has a series. It's a great space. So I said, "You want to come in and just sing a number? We'll arrange something for you, whatever you want." So she said, "Yeah, absolutely." So we did one of her songs, and we did a song that Billie Holiday had done, and didn't know the song. It's called "Somebody's on My Mind," and I hadn't heard it before. I looked it up and arranged that for her, and she sang with us, and it was it was just remarkable, just how the experience. And so from there, it snowballed into doing a project. So. Yeah.
Well, I still can't believe that you hadn't played with
I know,
Dee.
yeah.
I mean, it's like, wow, man. Especially in Chicago. I mean, for those of you that don't know the ins and outs of the Chicago jazz scene, busy musicians usually don't get to play together, so I guess that makes sense.
Happens,
but you would assume that you're going to get on some gig or something.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine. So you guys, let's talk a little bit about this jazz orchestra, because it's got an interesting history that we talked a little bit about off camera.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about the history of it?
Well, the group itself started back in 1950, and it was organized by one of my teachers and mentors, Tom Hilliard. And back then, Tom had this band, and it was all the young and current professional musicians and arrangers of the time. And I think he ran the band from the early 50s till the 80s. In 1959, he recorded an album called The Legend of Bix. It was out on the Argo label. And he was a huge Bix Beiderbecke fan, and so this tribute album sort of snowballed his interest in making this band an actual thing. And it probably, over the 30 years it lasted, they did a lot of interesting performances. Towards the end of Tom's life, we sort of reconnected, and he gave me this library of music. It was 150 charts.
Wow.
Stuff that had spanned for 30 years, and I was, touched. And then Tom passed, and because we're all busy and it's kind of crazy being a musician and all the things we do, it sat in my basement, I'm ashamed to say, for 10 years. But in 2014, I called up some friends, two of which were also students of Tom's, Bob Sutter and John Cornegie. Bob Sutter is a pianist in MJO, and John Cornegie is a saxophonist and arranger in MJO. So I called those two guys up. We put together a band, and we started reading through, over 3 years, we met like monthly, reading through all these charts. Some of them were just works of art. Some of them were like, tunes to do work, to go out and do casual dates and to make money. But some of them were just like stunningly arranged. Some of them avant-garde. Some of them a lot of Bix, Beiderbecke-oriented types of arranging. And it was amazing. It was like being a jazz archaeologist, being able to go through all the charts, say, hey, let's try this one. We would read it and we'd go, oh my God, wow.
And for that amount of years spanning, so I mean, it's almost like because his writing obviously evolved, everything evolved. From the 50s to the 80s,
exactly.
I mean, it's like you're historical, going through his whole life,
right?
Which had to be wild.
It was, and what was funny about it is you go through and everything's handwritten.
Oh, really?
All handwritten. There was no music engraving like Finale or Sibelius, and they would do shortcuts because it was so much labor involved, and we had to relearn what those shortcuts meant. Like you put a key signature and then not put another key signature, or there'll be some kind of weird indication about go here, go there. It was just crazy.
Yeah.
So we had to sort of decipher things. But flash forward, after reading, like just getting together for like 2 or 3 years, we decided to write our own music for this band. And the instrumentation is great. It's 3 saxophones, alto, tenor, bari, trumpet, trombone, and then rhythm section, piano, bass, drums. So we stuck with that instrumentation, the octet format, and started writing originals. And John Cornegie, as I mentioned, is a great arranger. Doug Scharf, our trumpet player in the band, is an amazing arranger as well. I do some arranging. And so we did a record in 2018 called The Road to Your Place. And that started, and we're going to keep going and see where it takes us.
Well, and the octet instrumentation and size makes it manageable probably too, because you're not trying to book something with 18 pieces, and you're not trying to, because that makes it a lot more difficult and a lot less financially able to happen.
It's a little easier to negotiate, less moving parts. The other thing I like, though, about the small band format is it's more like chamber music. It really kind of speaks to my interest in a more intimate artistic setting. Big bands are great and orchestras are great, but sometimes when you whittle it down or you distill it down to a few instruments like 5 horns and rhythm, it's a little bit more challenging to arrange and get that full sound. But at the same time, you can also get really involved in who the players are, and it's been fascinating working with this group in that regard.
So let's talk about the new recording.
Yeah.
So you've got this group, and you've got Dee Alexander, and now you just recorded. I think you just finished, and you're going back in for 1 or 2 more sessions, and you're going to be completed out on it, and that's going to come out late summer, and it's going to be out on Delmark. And they are doing some incredible stuff at Delmark. I mean, talk about just bringing all different styles and genres into Delmark now. It's really incredible. So how did this come about at Delmark?
Well, I reached out to them.
Yeah.
I knew the new owners, Julia Miller and Albiol Barlari, and they were friends of mine before they wound up taking over Delmark. And I just emailed them. I said, listen, I'm doing this. I'm going to do a project with Dee. This was going to happen.
Yeah.
And I said, are you guys interested in putting this out? And we had a conversation. We talked about it, and they like the idea, and I'm really happy with their energy and what they're bringing to this, because they're so behind Dee and this project and making it a Billie Holiday tribute record. And they we asked a lot of questions like I wanted their input because it was important to know that, and I also wanted Dee's input. So it was interesting back in, I think I talked to them before the first of the year, at the end of 2018, and then we had a meeting in January, and we talked about content, about what we want to do. We want to do a Billie Holiday tribute, but we don't want to just remake it. We just don't want to just transcribe Billie's songbook and redo it. We wanted to put Dee's fingerprints on here and her interpretation. And also the band members. We have some amazing soloists in the band. And
Well, and also to make it unique, because I mean, there's been a lot of Billie Holiday
Exactly.
tributes.
Yeah.
So I like that idea. I mean, you want to put your own feel on it. And this
Yep.
is
Yeah.
So Dee, what input did Dee have? I mean,
Well, we
that's-
got
it's
together
gotta be
and I
insane.
said, Dee, what do you want to sing?
Yeah.
Because she chose the initial song, Somebody's on My Mind, and I loved that. It was beautiful, and when I arranged that, I wanted to keep the charm of it, but I wanted to do my own thing with it harmonically, and so we went on, did some research. We spent many hours going through the Billie Holiday discography, and it's amazing. She was in her 20s. I'm not a historian, but I think early in her career, in the mid-30s, she was recording a ton. And she was like the featured singer in a lot of these orchestras, some famous bands. And so we just went through the repertoire and we said, oh, that's a nice song. Dee was like, can we do this one? I go, yeah. So we would figure out what songs we wanted to do and then how we wanted to do them.
Yeah.
In the sense of what we wanted to sound like today.
When you have that much repertoire that you're going through, I mean, you could come up with 35 tunes.
Oh,
that you
easily.
wanna do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, so how do you whittle that down? Because you can't do 35 tunes.
You
on a
can't
recording.
do 35 tunes. The spindle set,
Yeah.
No, we just kind of figured out we wanted to make, even in the age of downloads, we wanted to make a collection of songs, an album. And so we thought, let's find out what is exciting for Dee to sing. What repertoire would lend itself of what from Dee's discography? What would lend itself to Dee, and what does she want to do with it? And you sort of figure out you're going to do some ballads.
Yeah.
You're going to do some up tunes. You're going to do maybe some blues, influence songs. And we just kind of like came up with a list and went with that. And we swapped things out here and there, but pretty much came up with that.
Did you do all the arranging on it, obviously, and
It
wrote
was
all that?
it was actually 4 arrangers. I did some. John Cornegie did some. Doug Sharf did some, and we also were lucky enough to get Tom Matta, who's at DePaul.
Okay.
He's a jazz faculty at DePaul. Amazing arranger. We got him to do one too. So we had all original arrangements. So we were.
Wow.
Yeah, it was-
So what's the process? Like, how long did the concept start to the recording process?
Normally these things can take a year.
Yeah.
We did it in 6 months. Because especially when we knew Delmark was on board, we thought, well, we want this out by August.
Right.
Possibly
Before the Jazz Fest,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
possibly before the Jazz Festival. So when we picked the songs and we had our conversation with Delmark, it became apparent that John and me and Doug needed to start writing our butts off and like figure out. So we just started cramming. And I spent more time in the basement between January and April. And my family never saw me because I was down there writing and arranging.
Yeah.
And it was great. I loved doing it, but it was a little bit of pressure getting it done and then booking the band and rehearsing the band. And so we did it in record time in like 6 months.
So that's supposed to come out late summer, probably, hopefully late July, August, somewhere in that ballpark on
Yep.
Delmark Records.
Yeah.
And it reminded me when you were talking about being down in the basement and writing and all that. I remember we interviewed you for the Jazz String Quintet.
Right.
And I remember we interviewed you at the Green Mill one time
Right,
before
yeah.
one of your gigs for one of the ChicagoJazz.com videos I used to do.
Right, yeah.
And you guys were doing a performance there, and you had just, I think, come out with a new recording at that point, or that you just did some arrangements and stuff.
Right.
But you reminded, because you were talking about in 1997 when you said sure to somebody, I've got these tunes, and then you locked yourself in the basement and started writing.
And
so
that's
you're
how-
used to being locked in the basement writing music.
Yeah,
apparently.
it's self-imposed exile from reality, and I guess I kind of, when I'm writing, it's usually on a deadline.
Yeah.
And I'm also writing for specific people and for a specific scenario. Either it's a performance or recording, and it's for me it's my creative juices. When I know who I'm writing for, and when it's going to be happening, I get inspired. I start to hear it in that environment, whether I'm performing at the Green Mill or if it's a concert hall. Jazz String Quintet was, back in '97 when it started, it kind of got its start from just being asked to write for that configuration, string quartet and saxophone. But it wouldn't have gotten off the ground if it wasn't for some mentors and some friends like Cliff Colnett, an amazing arranger in town. I got to know him when there was a very viable and vibrant jingle scene in Chicago. And I got to work with him, I got to know him, I got to, take some of his arranging courses. So he got me going with that, and so you owe everything to people who came before you and helped you out. And he's one of those
was
guys.
he teaching? Because you went to school at DePaul for music. Was that like a jazz studies kind
Actually,
of?
no. Back then they didn't have that. They didn't have it. They had a jazz band and a jazz ensembles, but no degree in jazz. But I majored in composition both undergrad at DePaul and my graduate at my master's.
So you were always interested in writing.
Always a writer, always interested in all kinds of music, whether it was classical music, love Stravinsky, still do. I mean, Ellington. I mean, it's all great. Whatever great music there is, I'm very interested.
What do you think drew you to the compositional stuff? I mean, because you're originally like a sax player, right? I mean, I'm assuming you came out of high school, you're a sax player, you're playing and all that. You went to college and you got into the compositional thing and arranging and writing.
I think, there's a really strong connection between improvisation and composition. They're separated by time. Improvisation, you prepare to improvise, but then you improvise spontaneously. You can do the same with composing, but you don't do it spontaneously. The writing process happens over time, but it's more gradual. You can go back and revamp things. But the connection between improvisation and composition, somehow I made that connection early on in college because I was improvising. I was playing at jazz clubs, studying jazz on my own, and when I started digging into composing, I found all these connections that made sense to me, that actually influenced my improvisation, and then my improvisational pursuits influenced my compositional pursuits. So they sort of fed and helped each other, and it's always been there for me. Matter of fact, when I have a little, writer's block, you can get, I'll just pick up my tenor and start coming up with ideas, and then, okay, great, I'll write those down. Oh, yeah, I like that. Let's use that. And it's just constant flow between the two.
Because you have to be naturally curious, I would imagine. Because you tell me if I'm wrong, but talking to like a Ryan Cohen or Orbert Davis, they're fascinated by it. So they go back in time and they start watching and they're reading scores and learning what the masters did. Is that something that you did?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. Listening to music is the best tool. I mean, obviously looking at scores can give you insight, but now if I'm listening to music, I can sort of imagine what it looks like on a page, and maybe even how it's organized. There's a hierarchy. If you have a melody and accompaniment, and how do you make an accompaniment that complements the melody? You sort of like start to see what a composer is doing and how they're mapping out their music, whether it's an orchestrational thing. So that's definitely a thing, to be able to go and look at the masters and understand, like, oh, that's why that works. Oh, this even transcribing a solo is kind of a composition. It's an exercise in composition, depending on how you look at it. If I'm transcribing, pick any saxophonist, then I tell this to my students too. Transcribe, go in there, and then steal everything. Steal everything. If you like it, steal it. Practice it in every key. Work on it so you can call it up on an improvisation. Figure out how to use it in other keys and other chords. Just, if you like it, steal it. Figure out how it can make it yours.
Well, that's the key too, right? To music. So composition is the same thing, right?
Same thing. Yeah.
It's just incorporating and finding your own voice in what you're doing.
Yeah.
So with the string quintets in 1997, that's the first time you got it together. Now, explain to everybody what the instrumentation of the string quintet is.
So the string quintet, my quintet, is string quartet, which is 2 violins, viola, cello, and saxophone. And the saxophone I play in that group is always soprano sax.
Okay.
And I've sort of developed my own style of playing soprano sax, my own development. I developed my sound to fit inside the string quartet. It's still a jazz sound, but it sort of has a little bit of a, it's hard to describe, but it blends with the strings. And over the years, I've, in '97, I wrote this first piece, and it changed my life. I had, people talk about epiphanies.
Yeah.
It definitely gave me an epiphany of purpose of what I should be doing. And that was writing for strings for this 20-year period, and then playing with strings and and working out the music so that I can not only write for them, but I can improvise in that setting as well, which is, for me, fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Over the many years that I've been doing this, I've had extreme fortune of working with Kurt Elling. I had written for him. He recorded with us on our first CD. I was actually, and then we went on to work with Patricia Barber.
Mm-hmm.
She sang a couple songs on our following CD, and the most recent album I did for Jazz String Quintet is called The Pythiad. And that singer is, it was written for a singer, Cheryl Wilson. And she's sort of an unknown and an amazing singer. Some people don't know her, some people know her real well. But she also came from singing in the studios when there was a lot of commercial work in Chicago. And she's gone on to do amazing things. She's been backup. If you look her up on Wikipedia, her backup singing, it's the who's who.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. But she's an amazing vocalist, and she and I got acquainted through where we both teach at Roosevelt University.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote kind of, things, one thing leads to another. When you meet somebody and you get interested in what they're doing, I usually try to write for them. And she agreed, yeah, sure, I'll sing whatever you want. So I thought, okay, here we go. I got to write something. What should it be? And
so you have no idea at this point.
At this point, no, I haven't a clue what I'm
Because
going
she
to
probably
write.
can sing any style known to man.
Absolutely.
Right?
So the weird, lineage of me creating this album called The Pythiad is I'm sitting downstairs going, okay, I've got to write something for sure. I want to write something for sure. What should it be? And I thought back like 3 years ago, I'm sitting at my writing station, and I remembered like several years back I had a conversation with a friend of mine at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. He kind of curates some of the spaces there, some of the performances. I had been out there with Patricia Barber to play on her record, Mythologies. And it's the whole Greek mythology tied in with Patricia's thing. And when I was there, my friend Ralph Flores said, hey, Jimmy, he calls me Jimmy. He goes, if you come out here, I'll bring you out here if you write something that we can present that ties into the museum with the Greek mythology. So I'm sitting at my writing studio, and all of a sudden I go, wait a second. Ralph said he would bring me out to LA if I wrote something. I go, fine, that's what I'm going to write. So then I go, now, okay, it's going to be for Cheryl. I got to write words. And I already tried doing this a year ago, and I'm horrible at writing lyrics.
That's like a whole other ball.
I tried it, and I said, no, that's not me.
Yeah.
So I sat there, and I all of a sudden a light bulb went off in my head. My son just graduated from Beloit College in creative writing. So I said, Coleman Gailloretto, would you be willing to work with me? And I want to write this piece, and I need it to be Greek mythology. I'll write, so it took about 6 months to write this suite of 10 movements. And he worked with me over that time, just I came up with some melodies. I said, it's a sad character. What do you got? He would look, he'd do all this research, and there's no shortage of tragedy and strange, Greek characters.
Not in the Greek mythology.
But it was also fascinating. We wound up choosing some lesser-known characters, but fascinating nonetheless, and it unfolded, and it was so beautiful to work with him. He was in his mid-20s at the time, and just wrote some beautiful, elegant lyrics. And I just, it was a lot of work, but it came easily, and just over the course of many, many months, and it was fascinating. And then we wound up going to Los Angeles and playing it there. So the happy ending, or it's all a happy ending, but the cherry on top was, when this CD was done, I emailed my friend and said, guess what I did? And he goes, okay. And so we worked it out, and I wound up working with Cheryl. My wife and myself flew out to LA. We wound up working with some amazing string players out there, which is, that's a beautiful town for musicians. And so we did a performance that was it was remarkable.
When you get into that process, and this is something that I always think about, and we come back to almost the business side of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you get into it, like I'm somebody, if I'm going to do something, it's going to be like here we go, let's go,
Right.
I'm getting this thing done in 2 weeks.
Right.
You can't go into these things like that, even if you wanted to. Even if somebody said, I need this thing done. I mean, it's got to be a process, especially if you're thinking and you're creating something from the beginning.
Right, yeah.
How do you think about that to get yourself like, all right, I know this is going to be a 9-month project or
Mm-hmm.
however, because you must set it up in your mind because you know what it takes.
Well, when I sat down to write the Pythiad, there was no real deadline in mind. I just knew I could do it and keep going until I'm done.
Yeah.
With the project with Dee, there was a bit of a deadline in my mind. But to answer your question, to your point is how do you keep going? I got to tell you, when I'm sitting in front of my writing station and I'm doing it, I could sit down and then all of a sudden I go, what time is it? And 6 hours will have gone by.
You're not
kidding.
even worried about it.
I'm
It's
not
just
even
boom, you're
aware.
so
I mean, I've got the
into
day
it.
free. And I'm like, okay, I want to write today. And 6 hours will go by like that. And
Wow.
it doesn't even register. And then I go, I got to go to bed. I get up and I set my alarm. When I'm in a writing thing, I'll get up early and get down there at 7 a.m. because I want to. I'll actually be thinking about things before I go to bed, and I'll wake up like, wait a second, that's how I'm going to do it. And I have to go down because when the muses speak,
Yep.
you have to obey because then they'll go on to somebody else. Because they have a long list of people they need to get to. And I go, okay, fine. And you have to sort of I'll get that down. You write it down, even if it's just taking a note or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now with the jazz string quintets, you guys are still playing and doing things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've done a lot of things with that group. I remember, you've done stuff at, I think, Millennium Park. You've
Right,
done
yeah.
a lot of different things with that
Right,
group.
yeah.
And
We went to New York and did a concert with Fred Hirsch and on a barge. It's called Barge Music. I don't know if you know this place.
No.
I don't remember the woman who started this. She has since passed, but she started a chamber music concert series from buying a barge.
Just a
on the Hudson.
barge on the Hudson.
Yeah. And so the barge was floating out, and then she built, wood floors,
Yeah.
Beautiful seating, and it was a whole concert series that would happen year round. And so we actually, I think in 2007, I got the chamber music grant, and it was like. It's a gift, but it's a when you get money to do things in music, people don't realize how much it costs to get something done, like a recording, and rehearsing, and it's an amazing thing. And when I got the call that I got this grant, this award, I was like, what? It's like, you're going to give me money to do what? Anyway, so we did that was our first CD, and I used that money to go to New York and play on this particular barge, and I had known Fred Hirsch from working performing his Leaves of Grass here in Chicago at the Goodman, and I said, "Listen, we're coming there. Would you want to sit in with us or play with us? I'll write something for you." And he agreed, and we wound up doing this concert on barge music, and it was quite stunning.
Wow.
Yeah. And it moved in the water. You were.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you felt it. It's like, and unfortunately, I didn't know this, but our second violinist had motion sickness. And I didn't know it was going to move. And she goes, "Jim, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do this." And it worked out, but it was kind of funny.
It's interesting because when you get into the classical side, so the string musicians, string players, do you have to find the right ones that understand jazz and classical? Because there's that whole thing where if you're playing classical piano and then you want to switch over to a jazz piano, and getting the feel, not even the improvisational stuff, just the feel of it.
I know what you mean. The answer is yes and no. The players have to be willing to do and not do certain things to make it right. They never have to improvise. It's something I never ask my string players to do, because that's not what they're trained to do.
Yeah.
And but the things I do ask them to do occasionally, very rarely, is to swing a note. But it's almost not needed, because something that Cliff taught me to do, Cliff Colnett, is that if you write it a certain way, you just have to ask them to play what's on the page, and it'll happen the way you. If
you write it the right way.
If you write it the correct way, and a good example is Bernstein. Right now, I'm playing West Side Story with Lyric Opera. An amazing experience in and of itself. But getting to read what Bernstein does to make classical players swing is an education.
Ah.
And Cliff hit me to that. I learned just from playing some of Bernstein's music that, he's writing it this way so that when you listen to it, it sounds like it's doing this thing that jazz players do. But they don't know. I'm just reading the page. They're just reading the music.
Yeah.
There's some of that. There's some of that sleight of hand in my writing, where I just kind of figured out, okay, if I have them do this and play that note there, it'll sound like it's swinging. You know? Or if I don't need it to swing, I'll do that. So it's kind of a compromise of or trying to figure out how to get what you need from the people that are in front of you.
But let's talk before we finish all this up.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about your playing, because outside of all the composing, all of this other stuff you have going on, you just mentioned you're playing at the Lyric Opera, so you're playing in the pit there.
Yeah.
You were touring. I think you were playing with Patricia Barber here and there.
I
you were just in New York.
I was just in New York with her. I was there, kind of to be do some sightseeing with my son. But I thought, well, let me just call up Patty. Said, "Here at the Birdland, right?" She goes, "Yeah." I go, "Can I sit in?" She goes, "Yeah, you can." She just put out an amazing CD called Higher, and it's out on Artist Shares, and I'm on that CD and very proud to be on it. Her writing is so inspiring. She's been getting into this writing art songs, kind of like Schubert and Schumann would write during their day, and it's just beautiful music, and harmonically something I could never envision, by myself. Just hearing her sense of harmony and what she's doing with it is pretty unique. And I'm with her on Monday nights at the Mill, and I've been doing that for a while. And that to me is one of my favorite gigs, to be there with her on Monday night and to play with, she has her steady bass players, Patrick Mulcahy and John Deidermeyer, and those two guys with Patty. It's a great trio. And, in Patty's thing, her playing and singing has evolved. And, she's constantly, creating a new way of presenting her music. It's just stunning to be around that.
Well, I had her on the feature interview in November.
That's right, yeah, right.
And hearing her talk about her concepts and everything, it's it just keeps evolving. I mean, that's her whole thought process. Yeah. She's not thinking about staying stagnant, and that's what reflects in her music.
Yeah, and it inspires me. It inspires me to sort of figure out what, whenever you pick up the saxophone or you're sitting down to write, for me, I'm kind of, part of it is maintenance, just keep everything kind of, strong, but you're kind of going, well, how do I want to do this? What's another new way of presenting, playing on this chord change or this song or this standard?
Well, and that's true artistry, right? I mean, you're an artist, because I know you play a lot of different things, so I'm sure you played some jobbing things here or there. You do things like that, so you're not exactly taking it way outside if you're playing for a specific event. Context
is pretty much important.
Right. How did you start doing this? So when you were coming up, you talked about the jingle scene and all that. Were you in that kind of jingle scene towards the end of it, or?
Yeah, well, back in the '90s, the jingle probably had another 10 years left. It's kind of gone away for various reasons, as most industries change and evolve.
Well, Chicago had a lot of studios. I mean, for
and
years.
A lot of companies.
Yeah.
So, but when I was at DePaul, even though I was a composition major, I was studying classical saxophone with Bob Black, who's a great teacher, taught me everything about practicing and playing the saxophone. I studied with a jazz, kind of a local jazz lesson, Joe Daley.
Oh, sure, yeah, Joe Daley.
I studied with him for years, and a
lot of guys studied with Joe.
A lot
Daley.
of guys did,
yeah.
And I played classical music. I played avant-garde music. I played in jazz clubs with different groups in town. Whatever was interesting to me, and it would come my way, I would say yes, let's do this.
Yeah.
I played early on. I played with Lawrence Hopgood before he became the household name now that we
right. Yeah, right.
But and John Mulder, I played with him. I mean, I'm currently playing with Steve Million, and he's got a group called the Baker's Million. Andy Baker and Steve have a group, and so I mean, just as you go through the process of being a musician and an artist, you not only figure out how to make a living, you also try to figure out how can I do that and be an artist. It's an interesting balancing act. And for some people, one is more important than the other.
Yeah.
And that's just a personal choice. I've been lucky to have options of having both, and to the degree where I can make my living in music, and be an artist and try to evolve and keep my focus in making beautiful music. I'm lucky. Not everybody, can say that they're doing both and they're happy with it. That's the idea, is to be happy.
Yeah,
right?
that's the whole
and
purpose.
Just the balance. Like if you're happy doing just this, do that. If you're happy
Yeah.
doing just that, I like doing both. I like being. I like playing. I make most of my living right now, knock on wood, in the theater, doing Broadway and Chicago productions. I play a lot of flute, a lot of clarinet, and I got good at that. And so now being employed in that way is great.
Yeah.
It allows you to be around amazing musicians, great, music, and
And then it also frees up your options too, because then if you're doing that,
Right.
then going and playing on a Monday night with Patricia Barber, or going and sitting in somewhere playing at Catch 35,
you're
the other
feeding
night, or
your
whatever
soul.
You want to do.
Yeah, you totally have to. And my wife is a freelance cellist, and so we've been doing this ever since we've been married. Just trying to make our way.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, with the all the different things that you're able to do,
Right.
it allows you to have all the different revenue streams that you need to be a working musician, which I don't think a lot of people, they see you up on stage and they're like, oh man, that's great. But I mean, you also teach at Roosevelt.
Right, and I tell my students, I go, if you want a career in music, you have to do 3 things really well. Maybe 4. Play your instrument extremely well. Play it in tune. Be able to improvise. Read chord changes. You have to be able to arrange music for any instrument that's available to you. So it means you have to study instruments and understand how they work, and how to do voice leading and all that kind of stuff. And you also have to know how to teach, and I do a fair amount of teaching, and I love teaching, and it's always a source of, inspiration for my own practicing. And you actually have to, the other thing, you have to be very organized about what you do. Because if you say yes to something, you better follow through and show up on time, and I think, as a teacher, I need to teach them that as well.
Sure.
I didn't know that when I was in
No.
my 20s. I was like,
So do you have people that say, it seems like a lot of work, I'm going to go into the accounting department?
some have,
Yeah.
some have, and I don't begrudge them, because
No.
they see, they can't see the path before them, and I don't, I'll be honest, when I was in college, in my 20s, I didn't see a path. I just was like, give me this instrument, just give me that horn.
I want to play, let's
I
go.
just,
Yeah.
and as you learn how the world works and how relationships and business, how business works, you figure out how to navigate. And there's they teach that now in schools. They teach the business of music.
Do they?
Yeah, I
'Cause
think
they didn't teach it when I was in school either.
No, they
so it's
didn't.
like-
No, they didn't do it for me either. But you learn, and there's things you can't teach too.
Right.
You just have to experience it and kind of go through it. How to treat people. You can't teach people.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And how to be a good listener, and how to just be responsible.
Yeah. But talking about business a little bit, you mentioned before we came on camera, you've got a nonprofit that you've got started so that you can
Right.
kind of help, I'm assuming, fund some of these things, because this stuff is not, we're
Right.
talking about the Metropolitan Jazz Orchestra and the jazz string quintet.
Metropolitan Jazz Octet.
I knew I was going to screw it up.
There's a
It's on
copyright
the,
issue.
I know, it's on the bottom. I couldn't see that far.
I know what you mean. The idea is that, okay, the nonprofit is called Jazz Artists Resource. And it got started kind of at the same time MJO, the Metropolitan Jazz Octet, was starting to explore the music of Tom Hilliard. I had somebody approach me and say, listen, I can figure out how to help you with this. I know people who can help you pay the guys to rehearse.
Right.
And I said, okay. He goes, but the only thing is it has to be something that could be written off, so it has to be nonprofit. So I figured I quickly got connected to a company that would be a fiscal sponsor out in New York. And then so I used them for a little bit as a fiscal sponsor for nonprofits, so that whatever money comes in, that could be a tax deduction. Then I formed my own, because the fiscal sponsor was taking 10%.
Right. So
I figured I can do this. So I just, get together with a lawyer and say, fill out your paperwork. It's not that hard to do, to become a nonprofit. You have another set of tax returns, but it's not that bad.
Right.
So anyway, so we became a nonprofit, and we were starting to get some money from people who are interested in seeing our mission statement happen. And that mission statement, it's kind of threefold. One, to be able to present music and support jazz, whether it's writing new music, what I call curating older music, or discovering, like, there's so much music out there that has yet to be presented to anybody, and some of it's very old.
Mm-hmm.
You could go, and that's what happened with MJO. We had this music that hadn't seen the light of day for maybe 20 years, and so we were able to do some concerts with Tom Hilliard's original library. We actually did a performance and a lecture demonstration that was about Spiderbeck, and so we did that at Roosevelt, actually.
Wow.
So, part of the mission statement is to take some music that hasn't been out there and to bring it to people, bring it to students. And the other part is to create new music, like the thing that we're doing with Dee. And another really important mission is to do some outreach. We're actually going to be doing some work with Merit School to work with the kids there, and on any level, on improvisation, composition,
Mm-hmm.
maybe playing with them, rehearsing with them, showing how we do what we do. So between creating new music and reaching out to students, that's our mission. And right now on the website, if people want to see that supported, they can look, and they can actually make donations on the website too. So
What's the website?
Well, the website right now is called Jazz Artists Resource. It's a brand new website. .com.
.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a brand new nonprofit. So right now it's so new that I'm sort of the only one dealing with it, and I'm learning as I go. It's a new thing. It's a new business thing that I'm every day I'm learning. Oh, this is how I should do that. Now I need to. We actually are working with a grant writer. We're trying to figure it out.
Right.
And that's, to me, is part of growing. And I want to see this grow because I want to see more things, like, not just for the groups that I'm involved with, but I also want to be able, if we can achieve the level of success where we can actually help bring in artists that just want to present their own music, that would be a huge thing.
Well, and also the outreach to the schools and
Yeah.
to the students.
Yeah.
You never know who you're going to touch.
I know.
And
yeah.
what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And also the fact that you're going back and going into the archives.
Right.
You never know what you're going to find.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like what you did with the Metropolitan Jazz Octet,
Mm-hmm.
and using that music. I mean, that music could still be sitting in a drawer somewhere if you wouldn't have spearheaded and just
Right.
decided to do something with
Right,
it.
yeah.
So I mean, how many other works are out there? So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, this is a great cause.
It's really interesting too, just to see what people were doing back then. That sort of, I wouldn't say the music the music existed, and then because people pass on, it stops for a little bit.
Right.
And to discover it, it's like finding a tablet and kind of being able to, oh my gosh, this is what they were thinking back then.
Yeah.
This is how they were writing music. This is what their calligraphy looked like. It's just, I
Yeah.
find it fascinating to be able to kind of go into their archives, and then what happens is it influences me in a way that I wouldn't have been able to get if I hadn't discovered it.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of into that. It's kind
Oh,
of
that's
fun.
cool.
I'd
Well,
like to do more of that.
You got to keep me updated on the nonprofit. And,
Yes,
however
yeah.
we can help.
Sure,
and as we
yeah.
get more projects going, we can help promote that for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep working at it and try to develop it.
Because you don't have anything else going on.
I got nothing. Yeah, I got nothing but time.
And of course, the new project, the Metropolitan Jazz Octet, is coming out with a new recording. Dee Sings Billy. That's going to be on Delmark Records. That's
Right.
coming out late summer.
Right,
So
yeah.
we'll be alert about that as
Sure,
well,
absolutely.
obviously.
Yep.
But Jim, thanks so much for coming
Thank you.
in. I really
enjoyed
appreciate
talking.
this.
That was fun.
No, it was great. And of course, thanks for watching. And of course, you can see the entire issue at chicagojazzmagazine.com. And until next month, we will see you then.